the controversy lies not necessarily in the concept, but in fact, you cannot separate appoggio or breathing from singing. So every time you practice singing, you're either practicing appoggio or you're practicing some other ways to support your voice. And therefore, any exercise that you do, you should be doing with appoggio technique rather than with other techniques. Because if you get used to a certain technique and you become a professional, it's almost impossible. I say it's almost impossible to change it later. Usually the change doesn't occur unless the singer gets into trouble, and then he starts rethinking and readjusting the whole thing, the systemic failure, if you like. It's important that you start to exercise appoggio, as I explained before, in everything you do. In spite of the fact that people say that appoggio is maybe an advanced technique, I don't look at appoggio from this angle, because advanced would mean that you can only get appoggio when, let's say, you're a very, very advanced level of singing. But that's not correct. If you get used to certain type of breathing in your singing, again, the change takes time and a great will to do something different, if you like, you know. So that's why my advice is to apply the method appoggio from the start and to develop it slowly into technique that will allow you to sing with very, very consistent voice, with beautiful timbre, without damaging your vocal cords. Let me first be more specific about registers. You know, appoggio singers do not think in terms of registers, because the whole technique is based on oneness in the voice. So if you think of registers, eventually you will be separating the head resonance from the chest resonance and from passagio, and all these things gonna more or less decompose your voice. I mean, it's going to bring inconsistency into your voice. Let me first clarify what I think about registers. Those who sing with registers is exactly the placement school, because a register is something that occurs when the switch occurs. So when the larynx moves from the lower position to the higher position, that's where the register occurs. But if you sing with a stable larynx that does not move upwards and downwards, there will be no register, there will be no passagio, therefore the voice will be very consistent. Well, transitive register and register, we think of passagio of register at all because obviously we have difficult sensations when we approach this level. We have obviously some inconsistencies coming to the voice, and so we're trying to fix that inconsistency. There are different ways to help us to fix that inconsistency. I'm going to demonstrate you how can you approach passagio. There's a suggestion that in order to overcome passagio, you have to cover it. But this is incomplete understanding of passagio. You don't have to cover anything. Or at least when we use the term cover, which is not very clear, because different teachers use it with different meanings. So that's another confusion. For me, covering should not be at all a word, because it's a confusing word in itself. Open throat, that's, I think the singer should stick with that. Open throat, no covering, no modification of the vowel, but with the use of great support, you can achieve oneness instrument and avoid, and I repeat, avoid registers in your voice. And you see there's two approaches here. One uses covered sound or modified vowel sound to make it easier to get to the passagio notes. And the other is using open throat technique, which does not modify an I into O. You see, I use appoggio in two cases, when I use open throat sound and so-called covered sound. The difference is in consistency of the vowel I'm singing. So when you sing an exercise based on covering, like oh, so you're closing at the top and at the passagio spots, that doesn't seem so bad. First of all, covering technique is not necessarily bad. It does not damage your voice. It's one of the ways to make it possible to get to the high notes and to the passagio. The only problem with covering technique is that when you start singing with real words, those who intensively use covering, they will have problems of singing pure vowels, and they will always try to modify these vowels into something more convenient to their voices rather than to the text. And it can really be not so beautiful when you sing somebody, you know, singing the passaggio from Parmi veder le lagrime. You see, it's Parmi veder le lagrime, it starts on F sharp. Parmi veder le lagrime, or Parmi veder le lagrime, or as I demonstrated before, the phrase from Celeste Aida. Some tenors would sing it this way. Celeste Aida, or this way, Celeste Aida, or something in between. You see, covering or modifying your vowels during this kind of challenging passages in arias, they not necessarily are dangerous when you cover your voice, unless you overcover it, you know, unless you suppress your larynx too low and it becomes just a lack of squillo, lack of the brightness in the voice. But covering is used by mostly 85% of professional opera singers, and it's considered to be a very good, a very solid technique. And I agree with that, except that this technique is not as beautiful as technique of full implemented passagio that does not modify and gives you the very pure, the most natural voice technique ever.